Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge, and today I am joined with Josh Larky and Ben Wolby of the 33rd team, and we are going to be looking at some Underdog Fantasy drafts, talking about some strategy that we like to utilize in our drafts, and we are going to be looking at some of our favorite and least favorite values at current ADP. If you haven't already, be sure to sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code Footballguys, and you will get a 100% deposit match up to $100 on your initial deposit. And be sure to stick around on the Football Guys channels because we also have a best ball guide that is going to be coming out very soon that will give you a huge edge in best ball drafting. So be sure to stick through to the very end of this episode where we are going to talk about our favorite and least favorite picks at ADP. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Launchpad. Is there an optimal draft strategy for best ball, or should you be more fluid in your strategy? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. As always, joined with two great guests here. We are now on episode 60 of The Launchpad. Kind of crazy to think how fast it is flying by. Last week, I was with Pat Fitzmaurice and Jay Arsht. We were looking back at the 2022 season, talking about some of our least and favorite picks from that year, what we learned from it, how we feel about those players heading into 2023. And now with the Super Bowl being officially over, it is done. We are done looking at 2022 and we are looking ahead at 2023 and most specifically best ball drafts. The big board is up. You can get your teams in right now and get a chance to win $100,000. And I am joined with Josh Larky and Ben Wolby of the 33rd team as we're going to talk a little bit about some best ball strategy. And we're also going to talk about some of our favorite and least favorite picks at ADP. So before we get into the show, Josh, why don't you go ahead and introduce everybody? You are no stranger to the show. I think it was episode 2 or episode 3 that you and Alex Caruso came on. And, now Alex Caruso is working for both of us at Football Guys and 33rd team. Introduce everyone and let everyone know where they can find your content.
Hey everyone, Josh Larky, Director of Fantasy and Gambling at the 33rd team. Jay Larky tweets on Twitter. The33rdteam.com is where you can find my content. And Dave and I go way back. I think we connected basically when both of us were really getting started in the industry. You were on my show really early on. I've been on the Launchpad. We launched Alex Caruso so far that he has like double the. I think he probably has like our followership combined equals his at this point. So we have a good success rate of helping others do better than us. So I'm excited for Ben to follow in Caruso's footsteps and also become a TikTok influencer after this show.
Yeah, Ben, if you follow that Alex Caruso trajectory, you'll have 100,000 followers by next year's kickoff. But I want to go ahead and introduce Ben as well. Ben started following you a while ago on Twitter and was just really impressed with some of the content you were putting out, some really informational threads, some great videos as well. So happy that we finally get a chance to connect here with our mutual friend and Josh Larky. Let everyone know where they can find your content, social media, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, well, first, Dave, thanks for having me. And Josh, thank you for hiring me. That goes without saying. You can find me on Twitter at Ben Wolby. I do work with Josh and the 33rd team, including our weekly or during the season weekly player prop happy hour, where I think I beat Josh in player picks by one pick. He definitely made more money, though. And I know that's what he's getting ready to say. But real men shoot for accuracy. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at Ben Wolby. That's where you'll find me.
Oh, see, I couldn't care less about my accuracy. I'm just trying to hit those plus 5,000 parlays every single weekend. That's what I strive for. Hit one of those and you're good for the rest of the year. But before we get into the show, I just want to remind everybody to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. You can check out all of the video content that we have from Football Guys right there. And you'll even get an early preview at some of our podcasts, which are on our YouTube, typically about a half day before they hit podcast platforms. So youtube.com/footballguys. Be sure to check that out. And if you're watching on Football Guy or on the Football Guys YouTube right now, give us a thumbs up because it's going to help some other people find this video. And if you are listening on audio, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, wherever you listen to your podcast, be sure to leave us a review if you enjoyed the show because that is going to help us grow a little bit. Now let's go ahead and jump right in. And I talked about this at the top of the show, the opening question that I alluded to a little bit here. Is there a strategy that you see as the optimal strategy? 2 years ago, everybody was beating the drum for zero running back. Last year, hero running back was all the rage. And now we see Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, and Jonathan Taylor as the only running backs going in the first round, as it seems like people are starting to veer more towards early wide receivers. So Josh, start us off here. In your opinion, is there an optimal draft strategy?
So I've done about maybe 10 of these drafts at this point. I think the only optimal strategy I found where you just have to do it, you need receivers early. Doesn't mean that you can't take one or two running backs early-ish. You can't take an elite tight end. That's okay. One elite quarterback, fine. But if you don't have at least 4 receivers after about 7 rounds of the draft, your team is going to suck. I don't want to sugarcoat it. The way that the receiver landscape is right now, unless you're confident that you're going to hit on exactly which rookie receivers are going to be the ones that pop, it gets really, really thin. And it's one of those things where if you just look at some of the quarterback, running back, tight end picks, rounds 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they look way, way better than these receivers. It gets really dusty. So I don't have too many strategy thoughts in terms of like, here's what you need to do in your first X number of rounds. But if you're not having 4 solid receivers through those first 7, 8 rounds, your team's dead in a start 3 half PPR format.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is you got to start 3 wide receivers and get a flex. So you need 4 receivers every single week to be putting up some good points from you, unless you're very, very deep at running back. And like you said, it's kind of after the 6th round that there's this big fall off. And I'm looking right now at ADP as is, and starting in round 7, these are the guys you're looking at: George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, Jordan Addison, Deontay Johnson, Gabe Davis, Traylon Burks, Quentin Johnson. There's certainly some upside with those guys in that range, but they are far from sure things. So if you're counting on those guys for weekly production, you can find yourself painted into a corner pretty quickly. Ben, I don't know how many of these drafts you've done so far this offseason, but is there one strategy that you find yourself leaning towards a little bit heavier?
I think I'm a big fan of zigging when others are going to zag. Right now, I really don't mind the idea of taking a tight end and a quarterback early and kind of just avoiding or at least punting the running backs until the mid round. And I think that it's much easier to hit on a wide receiver than it is a running back. I want to fill in wide receivers as early as possible, but if I can get Travis Kelce in the first round, I will take him almost every single time. I think he is such a cheat code. And I think over the last decade, we've seen the late round quarterback, shout out JJ Zacharyson. We've seen that strategy become very viable and very popular. But now we're seeing guys like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen be worth a top 4, top 5 round pick. So for me, I think following that strategy, and maybe while others are taking Jonathan Taylor and Justin Jefferson, I might want to go out on a limb, zig while others zag, and hope to find some value in some of those top positions, top players at those positions.
Yeah, and that's really the best thing you can do in just about any draft is try to do the opposite of what the consensus is doing, because that's how you're going to accumulate value. But I want to talk about Travis Kelce for a quick second, and we don't have to get too deeply into it right now, but I talked about it last week with Jay and Pat. I talked about it with Alfredo and Vig on the Pretend GM a couple weeks ago. Where do you currently have him slotted in? Because he is on my big board. I've got him at 102 behind Justin Jefferson in half PPR and full PPR. And right now you're getting him at about 4-5 in best ball. So that's an easy smash for me. Do you guys think that he is where he kind of should be at 4 or 5, or should he be higher or lower than that?
Ben, take it away. You love Kelce.
I really do love Travis Kelce, and I think something that I might die on this hill, but I think Travis Kelce is to fantasy football what Tom Brady is to real football. Like, take a look at your fantasy football leagues and take a look at the teams that are in the playoffs. Take a look at all of your leagues. I guarantee you that the Travis Kelce team is in the playoffs in 80, maybe even 90% of those leagues. He is a cheat code. Tom Brady gets to AFC championship games when he's on the Patriots. Travis Kelce gets it pretty far in fantasy football. I think the value that he provides, I could go on and on. I want to talk about him later on in the show, but he is year in and year out. There's a whole breed of fantasy football players who only know Travis Kelce as a tight end 1. He's been the tight end 1 or tight end 2 since 2015. I mean, talk about consistency. He is above and beyond the best value in fantasy football, in my opinion. I want to take him first, second, or third. And I'm very bullish on him, if you can't tell.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling we're probably going to talk about Travis Kelce a little bit later once we start talking about our values, our favorite and least favorite picks. But sticking on the topic here, I mentioned how Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, and Jonathan Taylor are the only running backs going in the first round. The next running back going after those 3, RB4, is Bijan Robinson, who is getting drafted 13th, 14th overall, kind of at that 1-2 turn. So, Josh, I want to throw this question to you first. Personally, I think that's kind of crazy. I think that we're drafting him near his ceiling. I can't imagine a single landing spot that pushes him higher than RB4. I could see a few that would push him below that. So right now, doing these really early season rankings, not knowing where Bijan Robinson is going to land, are you okay drafting him that early?
So two things. One, I think he's probably going to pay off that cost. If we look at Jonathan Taylor, Brees Hall, Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley, these like true can't miss prospects, they help win people leagues. I actually don't think him going at RB4 in a vacuum is crazy. The reason I have only drafted him once in my draft so far and why I'm not just pounding the table to take Bijan Robinson is like what you said. I don't see much of a path for him to increase his ADP, but I see a lot of paths where the ADP decreases. So even though I'm pretty confident he's going to be a mid to high end RB1 this year, if we're just thinking strictly on game theory, I want to try and predict post draft what these ADPs are going to be. I have a hard time seeing Bijan Robinson going up. I can definitely see some landing spots where it would go down. Like, I think a good one is, I don't think he's going to go here, but like, let's say he goes to Atlanta and next thing you know, he's in some kind of weird committee with Tyler Algier and maybe Cordell Patterson sticking around. I mean, it's not like he's going to do poorly in fantasy, but you would at the very least know that the ADP is going to absolutely crater and he's going to be a 2-3 turn pick within a couple weeks of the draft. So I think there's a lot of paths where right now it's almost like we're just assuming that Buffalo or Philadelphia drafts him. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a good chance those teams don't draft him. So
yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it too. Is and I kind of asked that when I asked the question, but I don't see any chance that he goes up from here. And last year, look at the two best rookies that came out of this class. Both had perceived bad landing spots. Kenneth Walker with Seattle, Brees Hall with the Jets. Nobody was really too crazy about that. We thought that there was going to be a timeshare force with Michael Carter. We weren't sure how Rashad Penny would eat into Kenneth Walker's workload. Obviously, things changed a little bit once Penny went down with an injury, but these perceived bad situations will scare people away. So that's what I'm hoping for. I hope that Bijan Robinson lands in a bad situation so I can get him at the 2-3 turn and don't have to pay up for him. Because even if Philly uses a first-round pick on Bijan Robinson, he's probably not getting ahead of Austin Eckler and Jonathan Taylor. So you're kind of buying him at his ceiling right now. Ben, do you have anything to add about the Bijan Robinson conversation here?
Yeah, I think even casual fantasy football players know who Bijan Robinson is. And I think Josh said it perfectly. You are getting him at his ceiling right now because people know him, people like him, and people expect good things from him. You can get a ton of value when you're looking at rookie players, specifically rookie running backs in fantasy football, but that value comes way later in the draft. And I think that you lose that when you draft Bijan because right now it's at his ceiling.
Yeah. Completely agreed there. Now, players who aren't getting drafted near their ceiling are wide receivers. And we've seen that wide receivers have been one of the biggest, rookie wide receivers have been one of the biggest cheat codes that you can have in best ball leagues over the last few years. Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown won people a lot of money their rookie years when you were getting these guys in the 7th, 8th, 9th. We don't want to talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown as a rookie. You were getting him in the 18th round. So looking at some of the guys that are getting drafted right now, I'm shocked that best ball drafters haven't started to notice this trend yet. The first wide receiver getting drafted is Jackson Smith-Njigba going at wide receiver 25. Jordan Addison is going all the way at wide receiver 37, kind of clustered in with Quentin Johnson at wide receiver 39. These guys seem like wild values to me right now. So Ben, are you in or out on these rookie wide receivers at ADP? Again, not knowing where they're going to end up playing.
I think the thing that maybe I think about here is aside from Jamar Chase, the wide receivers that you talked about, they were, when they had great seasons, they were rookie wide receivers, but they weren't typically touted as the best rookie wide receiver in the class. The Eagles passed on Justin Jefferson for who was it? I don't even remember at this point.
Jalen Reagor.
Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, that just because rookie wide receivers perform at a really high talent, I think it depends where they go, the situation that they're put into. And obviously, Jamar Chase, the exception from the guys that you've listed. So for me, yeah, I'm really excited about JSN in my dynasty leagues, really excited about Jordan Addison. But when it comes to best ball, I kind of feel like it's kind of a spray and pray approach. Just take these rookie guys late because there's value there, but I'm not targeting any in particular without knowing their landing, where they land in the draft.
Yeah, and I think that's the best thing to do is just the spray and pray approach, as you said, and that's what I did yesterday or last year. I made sure I was overweight on every single rookie wide receiver that had first and second round draft capital. I just tried drafting these guys as much as I could, and that wasn't the best class last year, but I think it's still a good habit to get into drafting these best ball leagues. Josh, how are you feeling about these rookie wide receivers at their current ADP? Or is there anyone maybe a little bit further down the list that's sticking out to you?
So I'm going to save. I really like one of these guys. We'll save him for later in the show. A guy that I am not crazy about is Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't know why drafters decided that he's 2 rounds better than every other rookie receiver. He is almost certainly not the first or second, maybe even not the third wide receiver off the board come the NFL draft. He has 1 elite season of production. The other 2 college seasons, he had under 50 receiving yards. This is a good prospect profile. However, to think that drafters have decided this is the surefire wide receiver 1 in this class is pretty crazy when there's even a chance he falls out of round 1 from all the reports I'm reading. Let me tell you a guy that I love, Jalen Hyatt. That's a name that probably doesn't mean much to too many people unless you're a hardcore dynasty guy. Jalen Hyatt's ADP is around 115, and he has an outside chance to be the first wide receiver drafted. You might look at mock drafts and you say, oh, but he's going late first round in every mock draft. Josh, that's blasphemy. Look at Quentin Johnston. Look at Jordan Addison. These guys are going like 15 picks ahead of him in every mock draft. And I'm like, well, you want to know what we haven't seen yet? The combine. Jalen Hyatt is probably going to run a high 4.3s 40 time. And what do we see every single year? Speed, speed, speed. It elevates guys. We saw it with Henry Ruggs. We saw it with Jalen Waddle. Speedsters get elevated. And I think that if he has a good combine, he could definitely sneak into the early first round. I think it's tough for him to fall out of the first round. So at ADP 115, I mean, what are we doing, people? That he should be going at least 2 to 3, 4 rounds earlier than that.
Yeah, that's a great one. And Lance Zierlein, who does great draft analysis, I don't know if you saw his most recent mock draft, but he had Jalen Hyatt as the wide receiver 1 getting drafted at 12th overall.
There we go.
So, I mean, people are starting to warm up to it a little bit, and I think that you are just on the money there with the speed. And we saw it even with Calvin Austin last year. These guys that are no names that start moving up draft boards because of speed. But if you're already projected to be a late first, early second round pick, and then you throw 4.3 speed on top of that, welcome to the top 10 because that's where those wide receivers end up getting drafted. So I'm completely with you on Jalen Hyatt. Now, we know that talking about rookies this time of year, the Super Bowl just happened last week. Most people haven't even started looking at the draft yet. It can be overwhelming this time of year, but we have our Footballguys best ball guide our Footballguys rookie draft guide that you need to check out. It'll guide you through and help you identify the players that are going to help you dominate your dynasty and best ball leagues with in-depth statistics, rankings, expert film analysis on 120 NFL prospects. We'll help you discover all the sleepers and stars of this 2023 class, understand the context behind their college production, and help you gain the edge that you need to win. On top of that rookie draft guide, which you can download in our bio or in the description below, footballguys.com/rookie draft. We also have an article that just came out where we compare our big board rankings to Underdog ADP and let you know who we think are the biggest and worst values at current ADP on Underdog. So be sure to check that out, footballguys.com/rookie guide. Now let's jump back into the show. And we had already alluded to this a little bit. And Ben, I'll have you start us off here since you said you like to get those early quarterbacks. We saw the impact that these early elite quarterbacks made in fantasy last year. And now Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, and Lamar Jackson are all going inside the first 3 rounds. Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen are going at the 1-2 turn. So do you think it's worth it to pay up for a quarterback, or is it maybe better to take 3 late round guys, knowing that you don't have to count on them week in and week out? Get, a Jared Goff and whoever else and try to just take the quantity over quality approach. What do you prefer, Ben?
I think in best ball, you are really trying to get the guys that are going to put you in the best position to win over the entire season. Those spike weeks don't necessarily matter. They help. But to me, I want guys with very, very, very consistent floors. So getting guys late like Jared Goff definitely help. But guys who have consistent floors like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, how much more consistent and high can you get? Obviously, we love mobile quarterbacks. There's one guy in particular that you mentioned that I absolutely love at his ADP, and I'll talk about him later. But there are other guys like even Kyler Murray, who I think right now he fell real down. I think his ADP is around 100 right now. He's even a viable option for you to take late. And while, maybe his availability is a question mark, that team's rebuilding, it's a little bit of a question mark. I think that there is value that you can get in those late rounds, but it's very important to prioritize getting somebody early.
Yeah, there are some wild ADPs right now. And, you called out Kyler Murray, who obviously has concerns. He might not play early in the season, might not be fully up to 100%, might lose DeAndre Hopkins, might not have Zach Ertz. I mean, there are reasons for him getting pushed down, but the ceiling is still undeniable. And to see Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins and some other of these guys going ahead of him, it's kind of crazy. I mean, we don't even know if Daniel Jones is going to be on the Giants next year, let alone a starting quarterback. So to be taking him ahead of Kyler Murray, who we know has the job when he's healthy, is kind of crazy. Seeing Tua at QB 12 after the season he had, Tua has basically the same ADP that he did last year, despite putting up top 5 numbers when he was healthy. So there are definitely some values to be had late. Trey Lance is another guy right now that you can get in the 12th or 13th round. There are some concerns there, but if he plays, he's probably given us top 5, top 10 numbers there. So Josh, this is just bizarre. We played fantasy for a long time, and it felt like, in the early 2000s, when I was playing fantasy football almost 20 years ago, that's when you'd see people take the dominant quarterbacks early, and then JJ Zachariason flip the industry on its head. Everybody started waiting on quarterbacks, and now we see these elite rushing guys starting to creep back up. So where do you stand on this?
I've been taking a wait and see approach with quarterback. So there are a few guys that I really like early, and it also kind of dovetails in with we just have to make sure that we're getting enough wide receiver capital. So I'll give a few names looking at the rankings. I hate the person, love the ADP. Deshaun Watson at pick 78. Prior to this past season, Deshaun Watson was nothing other than a truly elite top 3 to top 5 fantasy quarterback. He takes 2 years off of football, and he has a bad 6 weeks in pretty awful Cleveland weather. I am willing to forgive those 6 weeks and say, you know what? The larger body of work is this was a guy on a Hall of Fame track. He also didn't have great weapons last year. They're probably taking a receiver early this year. Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and insert a stud rookie receiver with Nick Chubb in the backfield and a good offensive line. Deshaun Watson kind of looks like the profiles of these guys going earlier. And I don't understand how he's not going close to where Joe Burrow goes. Joe Burrow's ceiling is so much lower than Deshaun Watson's. And I think Deshaun Watson's floor is going to be significantly higher than this past year because he'll actually have a legitimate offseason. He'll have full preparation. He'll start week 1. So I really like him. And then the other guy I like, and I love this because I like when I hate a guy the year before and then I love his ADP the next year. God, I'm all in on Aaron Rodgers. People are like, how can you draft Aaron Rodgers right now? He was terrible in fantasy last year. I'm like, yeah, he literally had nobody to throw to. We were like, what, wish casting that Romeo Dobbs, the 4th round rookie, was going to be like some elite starting option for him. Robert Tonyan, who's one of the worst NFL starting tight ends ever. Really, this is what we were excited about.
And hey, Josh, don't hold back. I'll take it on the chin. Allen Lazard had the worst season of his career. He may have put up career numbers, but he was efficiently terrible last year. So
I was trying to avoid that one. Yeah, Allen Lazard sucks. Everyone there was terrible. And you know what? He's going to probably choose his own destination. Oh, you put him in Las Vegas. You put him with the Jets. That ADP is going to shoot up. It's almost like he's priced as if he's going to stay in Green Bay and they take another receiver, but it's still just not the best situation. So I absolutely love Aaron Rodgers right now. His play did not fall off even slightly. And I mean, if we're looking at where he's going, there's so much uncertainty. He's going around like Geno Smith, who I actually like at his ADP, but you can make the case that there's a chance Geno Smith does not start next year, or at least has to play in and compete for a Seahawks job. Rodgers is not competing for anything. He is the clear-cut starter. And I think he just gives you such nice floor and ceiling because it can only go up based on wherever he ends up going. Because again, he's choosing his destination.
Yeah. I'm with you there. And I think one of the guys that you talked about is one of the most confusing ADPs to me, and that is Joe Burrow right now going at 24th overall. I don't understand what we're thinking. It's like we made the same exact mistake with Justin Herbert last year that we're making with Joe Burrow this year, except we're doing it 4 rounds earlier. Joe Burrow should not be going ahead of Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields. People are losing their mind with that ranking. I expect that one to cool off a little bit, but you talked about the wait and see approach, and I think that's what I'm going to do too, because I feel like these quarterbacks right now, people are still recency bias looking at how effective these guys were last season. I cannot imagine that these ADPs last throughout the entire offseason. I think that once more people start drafting, they're going to want to take the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and we're going to see those quarterbacks start to fall down the board a little bit. So I'm not paying up for the quarterbacks right now, simply on the basis that I don't expect this to last. I think this is kind of a fluky thing right now, and I think we're going to look forward maybe in 3-4 months from now and say, what were we thinking pushing all of these quarterbacks into the first and second round? So with you on that one. The other position that I want to talk about, because right now rankings are just weird. I mean, it is very different than any fantasy football we've been playing in the last 5 years. It seemed like things were kind of getting figured out. There was a structure that we could anticipate every single year. And now things are all over the place. And I want to talk about tight ends. We already talked about Travis Kelce a little bit, but there is a strong delineation at the tight end position right now. Travis Kelce, like you said, going 4th overall. No other tight end is being drafted until 33rd, and that's Mark Andrews. He's getting clustered near TJ Hawkinson and George Kittle. Then we got another huge tier break, and then we got Dallas Goedert. It's just really weird right now. I mean, last year we saw 3 guys going inside the first 2 rounds. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts were all kind of clustered together. And now it seems like it is Travis Kelce or bust. So, Ben, I know this is kind of your guys, to talk to us about it a little bit. Obviously, you're okay paying up for Travis Kelce. Let's say Travis Kelce goes 101 and you can't get him. What is the best approach from there? Are you paying up for some of these mid-tier guys, or are you just hoping to find this year's Evan Ingram?
I think the thing with tight end is you're not at a disadvantage if you miss in best ball. If you don't get Travis Kelce, it's fine. Just kind of hoping you get a good tight end. There's no good way to predict this position. I think a really great example is Taysom Hill. That's a guy I want to target late because he could have a 30-point week, and that makes up for all of the duds he puts up all the other weeks. But let's say you get a guy like, I don't know, maybe Dallas Goedert, who puts up 3 points one week, 11 the next week. It's like, does that average out to the points that you're going to get from Taysom Hill? Probably, maybe. You're really not at a disadvantage here getting any bad tight end. You're only at an advantage if you do get your Travis Kelce, or maybe if Mark Andrews can live up to the hype that he had 2 years ago. So for me, I really want Travis Kelce. If not, in best ball, love Taysom Hill. He's going late enough where I think that he's worth a look. And other than that, just take the guys you like, because if you miss, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and I think last year that was one of the best approaches that you could take, is if you didn't get Travis Kelce, you wait till the final few rounds and you get yourself 3 tight ends. David Njoku, Evan Ingram. We saw a lot of these late round guys hitting last year. And looking at the current tight end rankings, I mean, there's a lot of guys that jump out to me. Michael Mayer, typically we always say avoid rookie tight ends, but we've seen now Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson. We've seen some very successful rookie seasons from tight ends as the college and NFL game get a little bit closer to each other. Also, Mike Gesicki, who is probably going to end up a free agent and somewhere outside of Miami. We know he's got talent. Maybe he finds a role somewhere. Trey McBride with Zach Ertz possibly not playing at all next year, coming off that ACL. Really like him. Isaiah Likely, Daniel Bellinger. There's some good names that I like that you can get basically for free at the end of your draft. And I think you're better off getting 3 of those guys than you are paying up for 2 of the mid-tier guys. But Josh, what are your thoughts here? What are you doing with the tight end position right now?
I like Kelce too. Here's a few guys I also like. I don't like the ADPs of Andrews, Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard. I think they're all pretty ridiculous. I love Kyle Pitts at 64. Kyle Pitts has done nothing except show us he's a mid-20s target share type guy. And the situation's 100% going to get better in some form. So I just love that you're getting the profile of, like, his profile compared to a Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, you are praying that he gets you an 18 to 19% target share. Pitts is going to be way above that. And then some. He's a lot faster. Goddard is actually slow for a tight end. It's pretty ridiculous. Like, Goddard is a floor play without the ceiling. Pitts is the ceiling play. That's kind of what you want for best ball. Like Ben said, we want these spike weeks. I like Darren Waller at pick 87. I don't know how his profile is any different than a Goddard, than a Kittle. Really doesn't make sense. A couple other guys I really like, David Njoku at 99. I would love to see what him and Watson do with a full offseason playing together. Greg Dulcich at ADP 131. I think he was 4th or 5th in the NFL in games with like 75 receiving yards at tight end. Basically, he was a spike week monster from a yards perspective, and I loved that. I also love Trey McBride. Zach Ertz is awful. And in his mid-30s, as a non-athlete tight end, he had a season-ending ACL injury. What are we doing?
Week 16, I believe, too, right? Or
it was the
15?
end of the season.
Yeah.
How is this guy going ahead of Trey McBride, who has second-round draft capital and is incredibly fast? And then the last dart that I like, Dalton Kincaid. I know very little about him, but he was productive in college. He seems like he'll be decently athletic, and he's going to get some pretty outrageous draft capital. So the fact that you can get him in like the 19th round when this guy could easily get you 600 yards and 7 touchdowns. I'm going to take some shots on Kincaid because I think post NFL draft, he's someone who's going to shoot up 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds.
Yeah. And I mean, getting these rookie tight ends shouldn't scare you off anymore. I feel like, Evan Ingram kind of put it to rest a few years ago with his record-breaking rookie season. Kyle Pitts did it 2 years ago. And we're at the point now where you can confidently draft tight ends. And this is a deep rookie class. Again, I will direct you to footballguys.com/rookie guide, where you can ring all up on these tight ends. And we've got some values that we have identified as very strong values. If you check out Jeff Bell's most recent article comparing our rookie big board to Underdog ADP. Now, to wrap up the show, what I want to do, I broke this up, kind of looking at the draft into 3 round sections. So rounds 1 through 3, rounds 4 through 6, and rounds 7 through 9. And what I want each of you to do is tell me your favorite and least favorite value from that section. So Ben, go ahead and start us off here. Looking at the first 3 rounds, who is your favorite value? I think I might already know this one.
Yeah, I want Travis Kelce. I know that's a bit of a cheat, right? You want somebody in the first 3 rounds, and I'm telling you the guy to take within the first 3 picks. But like I said, he is the fantasy football MVP for 3 reasons. And those reasons, consistency. I mentioned that he has been the tight end 1 or 2 since 2015. He is consistent, and he will be consistent as long as he is tied to Patrick Mahomes. He was good before Mahomes, and now he's just absolutely dominant at the tight end position. 2, the number of points. Sorry, Dave, did you want to say something there?
No, go right ahead.
Awesome. 2, the number of points that he scores. He's averaging 4 more points per game than George Kittle, whose availability has been suspect, and 2 more points than the tight end 7, Cole Kmet. He is just absolutely, I mean, you want to talk about tight end 1s? There's tight end 1s, Travis Kelce, and then even though Cole Kmet might be the tight end 7, he's like a tight end 2 or a tight end 3 because that's how dominant Travis Kelce is. The other thing I like about him is that value that he provides. There's Stathole Sports on Twitter. Jeff Henderson, I believe is his name. He does a really great write-up of like fantasy wins above replacement, where Travis Kelce is ranked 5th for the 2022 season. He is going to win you games. The other guys that are ranked above him, 2 running backs, Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey, who, they're very great running backs. I would love to take them in the first round, but I think running back is one of the most inconsistent positions in fantasy football, and you don't know where those guys will perform in the upcoming year. And then the other 2 players you might want to consider, 1, Justin Jefferson, who, I think he's the consensus wide receiver 1 right now. But me personally, I still think I might be taking Kelce over him just because of the positional value. And then the other is Tyreek Hill, who, while he was great this year, I'm really concerned about Tua. I know he had a great year, and I expect him to have a good year, but I kind of feel like McDaniel's scheme kind of got figured out at the end of the year. Tua did not look that great. I don't know if Tyreek, if he continues to get chipped at the line like he did last year, we may not see him have as dominant as a year. So like I said, to me, Travis Kelce is the Tom Brady of fantasy football. I want him everywhere. I will be heavily exposed to Travis Kelce this year, as long as I'm getting a top 3 pick.
And I said this on my show last week, and I'll say it again now. The reason people don't like drafting Travis Kelce is because your teams don't look sexy afterwards. You can't draft Travis Kelce with a top 3 pick and then go stunt on Twitter how great your team looks, because your wide receiver 1 is going to be Garrett Wilson and your RB1 is going to be, Nick Chubb or Travis Etienne, and you just can't build a sexy looking team. The fun teams to share are the ones that have Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp and Christian McCaffrey. And if you don't have one of those guys, you don't want to show off that team. I really think that's the only reason that Travis Kelce isn't going with a top 2 pick. Josh, over to you. Who is your favorite pick in these first 3 rounds?
I'm kind of offended that you thought Travis Etienne teams are not sexy teams.
Oh,
Travis
I love
Etienne is my
Etienne.
pick. So I'll tell you why I like Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne, if we just look at the running back landscape and the guys going around him, it doesn't really make sense. So why does Travis Etienne go over half a round after Kenneth Walker? Which offense do we think will be better next year? The Jaguars with adding Calvin Ridley and Lawrence entering year 3, or the Seahawks? I think the Jaguars are going to be a better offense. Travis Etienne and Kenneth Walker scored pretty similar fantasy points this year as starters. And guess what? Etienne barely caught any passes. We know that's in his range of outcomes. We know Kenneth Walker, it is not in his range of outcomes to suddenly have a massive 500 receiving yard season spike. That is not what can happen to Walker. That can happen to Travis Etienne. They're both equally fast home run hitters. And I just think Travis Etienne is the type of running back that can finish RB1, where right now we kind of saw his floor. His floor is he's getting 15 carries and he's barely being used in the pass game. And he's still an RB1 type. So I just don't really understand when looking at how thin this running back landscape is. I guess like another one, how is Breece Hall going ahead of Travis Etienne? Breece Hall
ACL.
got hurt 2 months into the season. He's not going to be ready week 1 at full strength. We literally just saw this show with Saquon from 2 years ago. These players are rarely the same immediately following when they have less than a year recovery. What are we doing here? Just take the guy that's healthy and Travis Etienne, who has a pretty similar range of outcomes to Breece Hall. Yes, Breece Hall healthy. Sure, I want Breece Hall healthy. He's not going to be that this year. I think Breece Hall should be going in the 5th round. He's probably not going to play the first month of the season. He's probably not going to be effective for quite a while as well. Who knows if the explosiveness will be there? Just take Travis Etienne.
I think the main reason people are taking Breece Hall, and I agree with everything you said, just playing devil's advocate here. I think people are hoping that by the time the playoffs roll around and by the time you advance and you're in those uber important weeks 15, 16, and 17, people are hoping that by then he'll be over a year removed from the ACL and maybe he'll have some of that juice back. I don't really believe in it. You know, I'm going to love Breece Hall in 2024 drafts a lot more than I'm going to like him in 2023 drafts. But I think that's the thought process for why he is still going there. But just talking on a macro lens here, I'm just terrified of drafting running backs early in general. You know, you look at the free agency class as is, you look at the depth of this draft class coming in, and then you look at the potential cap casualties like Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon and maybe even Derrick Henry. We're going to watch the entire NFL landscape get flipped on its head over the next couple of months. So I'm terrified to put faith into anybody. As much as we love Travis Etienne right now, would it really surprise you all that much if they go out and they bring in a big name running back like David Montgomery that's going to take away that passing down work from him? There's so much talent available right now in the running back player pool that it just really terrifies me from taking any running backs early. So I think after the draft, I'll feel a little bit more confident in my running back takes. But my take right now is just kind of avoid running backs in the early rounds because crazy things are going to be happening within the next couple of months. Now let's stick on these first 3 rounds though. And Ben, start us off here. Who is your least favorite pick in the early rounds?
You just said everything that I was going to say, Dave. I don't want to take Josh Jacobs because, I mean, the NFL landscape and these early round picks with running back. Josh Jacobs was good this last year. Honestly, he was great. He was phenomenal. He was a steal. But I'm concerned that he's going to be able to replicate where he was last year. He was so great and people loved him because he went in the 5th round and he finished as
8th round.
8th round. Wow. Yeah. And he finished as one of the best running backs in the NFL. But when I think about the type of running back that I want to target, it's not Josh Jacobs. Never mind the incredible season he had. I think if we think about the archetype of running back that we like to take, we want a guy who's consistent and on a good offense. And Josh, I'm stealing your words here, but you like running backs who have red zone work and a lot of targets. With all of the uncertainty that is going on in the NFL, we don't know what his usage is going to be. We don't know what team he is going to go to. What if he's on a bad offense? What if he goes to the Bears or the Eagles, who hardly target running backs in the red zone? What if he goes to the Dolphins, where he's in a split backfield? And there are far better options to take in later rounds with just as much uncertainty. He's currently the running back 9, but one of the guys you mentioned, Joe Mixon, he's going way later, and he might be a value that you might want to consider over Josh Jacobs. Other guys, James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, who we don't know what Jahmyr Gibbs' landing spot's going to be, but very real possibility that his ADP skyrockets over the next couple months. We also, some guy that I love right now is Zamir White, because the Raiders target running backs at the 7th highest rate in the red zone. And I think that he fits that archetype depending on how good that offense can be with Project QB Jarrett Stidham. I don't think that Josh Jacobs is going back to the Raiders. I don't think most people think that. So he's a good value, but there are just better running backs that you can get in later rounds that are providing exactly what Josh Jacobs provides to you.
Yeah, and really, it's kind of weird to see Saquon Barkley going over a full round ahead of Josh Jacobs. Obviously, Saquon Barkley is a better player, but they're both in the same exact situation that with the uncertainty, we don't know where they're going to land. Obviously, we'd expect that Saquon Barkley probably commands a little bit more of a target share than Josh Jacobs would, but Josh Jacobs is the younger guy. They're both equally talented. They're both coming off really good seasons here. And with that uncertainty, I just can't pay up for any of these rookies and, free agent running backs without knowing where you go. You talked about it, Chicago Bears. I love the Bears, and I think that they're going to be in the running for one of these guys. And while it would be really fun for real life football, it's going to be a disaster for fantasy. If Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs ends up there, he's not getting any check down work. He's going to see very little goal line work. And then you're going to have Khalil Herbert coming in there and taking a decent chunk of the pie as well. So I'm with you. I'm scared off with a lot of these early running backs that are in precarious situations. So Josh, same question over to you. First 3 rounds, who's a guy that you just can't stomach taking right now?
There's 2 players I truly hate. I hate their personality. I hate their ADP. I'm just kidding. I don't like the ADP of Cooper Kupp. He goes at pick 5. That's ridiculous. He's basically a 30-year-old coming off of a major injury, and we don't know what the offensive ecosystem or quarterback's going to look like. I think it's Matthew Stafford. There have been rumors that he's going to retire because his back is in shambles and that he could be the next Andrew Luck, where the back ultimately takes him out. The offensive line is going to be atrocious once again. Why are we paying up for Cooper Kupp at this point? It doesn't seem like that is the archetype of player. It's just like last year when people were like, why are you taking Jefferson ahead of Kupp? And I said, hey, Jefferson is younger with less target competition as it stands right now. And I don't care what Cooper Kupp did last year. That's just not the archetype that should be going ahead of Justin Jefferson, who looks like he's on pace to be maybe the best receiver ever. So Cooper Kupp doesn't make sense. And then what the heck is going on with Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes is the QB1 off the board, ADP 14. That is truly hilarious. He has minimal rushing equity compared to a Josh Allen, compared to a Jalen Hurts, compared to Fields, Lamar. There are so many quarterbacks out there that are going to give you so much more in the run game, which is the cheat code for quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes at his ceiling, if he has the 50 touchdown season again, maybe he's worth it at that ADP. That is basically it. You are essentially paying for the borderline best quarterback fantasy season ever for a guy whose profile suggests that he's probably going to finish QB2, QB3 most years. He wasn't even the QB1 per game this past year. That was Jalen Hurts. So I think it's just absolute blasphemy. I have one share of Patrick Mahomes. It was a team where I took Kelsey and then he failed to pick 22. And I was like, you know what? This is a unique stack. We're going to take it. But around the 1-2 turn, you cannot legally take Patrick Mahomes and consider yourself a quote-unquote analyst, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a wild ADP. And it's funny, say what you will about projections. And I don't know exactly what process Underdog has for generating their projections, but it's really funny to see Patrick Mahomes going ahead of Josh Allen when he's projected less or more than 2 points fewer per game than Josh Allen. I mean, like I said, projections, you got to take them with a grain of salt here, but I don't think anybody is anticipating that Patrick Mahomes is going to outscore Josh Allen next year. But for some reason, he is being drafted ahead of him. Patrick Mahomes is a great real life football player, but like you said, without that rushing upside, with his number one weapon being an aging tight end, no disrespect meant here, Ben, but he doesn't have that, Tyreek Hill to just score from anywhere on the field anymore. I'm with you. I mean, we are drafting him possibly above his ceiling right now, going at the 1-2 turn, completely in lockstep with you on both of those guys. Cooper Kupp is another one coming off that injury, 30 years old. And maybe having Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. Like, do we even know what's going on with the Rams? Do we know who their quarterback's going to be next year? I'm with you, completely off on Cooper Kupp. Now let's move to rounds 4 through 6. Again, talking about our favorite values. Now, Ben, start us off. Who is your favorite value at rounds 4 through 6?
Well, my favorite value is going to be a quarterback because I'm with you. I am not in on Mahomes at ADP, and I don't think you can really justify maybe Josh Allen, maybe, but a guy that I think his ADP not where it should be. It's going to be Lamar Jackson. He's going at the very beginning of the 4th round, and he is a top option at quarterback. If you take a look at the Lamar Jackson poster, the jersey behind you, Dave. If we take a look at what Lamar Jackson did this year, he had a nearly identical finish in points per game to Justin Fields, who is going before him. Granted, not by much. They have very similar ADPs. And I think the question mark with Lamar Jackson becomes his availability. And I get that. 1, we don't know if he'll be a Raven. 2, this injury, which might be a phantom injury just for contract purposes at this point. But even if his availability is fine, we know who Lamar Jackson is. He is a mobile quarterback. He is an elite rusher, and he doesn't need to score a ton of points in the NFL to score a ton of points in fantasy football. And if he is a Raven, Todd Monken, the new offensive coordinator on the Ravens, he is a run-first offensive coordinator, and he is going to do wonders for Lamar Jackson as a rusher and open up opportunities for him as a passer, too, in that offense. He's currently the quarterback 6. He's ranked behind Fields, Burrow, Allen Hurts, and Mahomes. And I don't really understand how he's being drafted behind Fields and behind Burrow. I would take him over both. Lamar actually had more fantasy points per play than Joe Burrow. You're getting an elite quarterback in the 4th round. I really love Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Lamar Jackson tout through and through. I have been for years. He's one of my favorite guys in the league. And I think, the obvious downside here would be that they franchise tag him in Baltimore and he says, hey, I'm not playing this year. That is the absolute worst case scenario. But what about the potential upside? What if he ends up going to Atlanta and all of a sudden is throwing the ball to Drake London and Kyle Pitts on an Arthur Smith-led offense? I mean, what if he goes to Detroit where he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, DeAndre Swift? I mean, there are so many possibilities here where he could actually improve from his current situation. And people get so scared off by the risk, but there's untapped upside with Lamar Jackson going into this year that a lot of people aren't really discussing right now. Josh, do you have anything to add on Lamar Jackson? It looks like you're chomping at the bit right now, unless you wanted to move on to your player.
No, I was just nodding along. I like what's going on here. I was very high on Lamar this past year. It didn't work out due to injuries and the Ravens having no receivers. Especially, I mean, he was pretty good when Bateman and Andrews were playing together. Unfortunately, that barely happened. So while I hate those early quarterback round ADPs, I think Lamar at this point, I can stomach it. I have a share at this point. So I think he's kind of like that best early round QB, cost adjusted.
And that's not a crazy ADP. I'm okay paying a 4th or a 5th round pick. I mean, that's where we were getting Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray last year. I'm okay with that. It's the Josh Allen and the Patrick Mahomes at 1-2. That's where I really have a problem with the ADPs. I'm okay taking a quarterback with that sort of elite upside because realistically, I mean, sure, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, they're going 1 and 2 right now, but Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, maybe even Trevor Lawrence, these guys still have overall QB1 in their range of outcomes, and you can get them 3-4 rounds later. So, Josh, still sticking with these rounds 4 through 7, who is your favorite guy to draft?
So let me first start off by saying that I am a wide receiver heavy drafter. Just so happens I will have a second running back that I also like. I promise you I will tout a receiver later in the show. I really like Jahmyr Gibbs. Purely from a game theory perspective, his ADP is 60. If you look at the NFL mock draft database website, I love it. They have a 39% chance Jahmyr Gibbs goes round 1. Round 1. This could be a round 1 running back that you're getting at pick 60. And overall, they think he's going to go at pick 28 on average. He's either going late first, early second round. I get it. He's kind of tall. He's kind of skinny. He never had more than about 15, 16 touches per game in college. But this is the type of profile that we want. A home run hitter as a runner who has an absolutely insane receiving profile. 300 receiving yards, 450, 450. Every year, all 3 in college, he was an absolute monster out of the receiving game. And it wasn't just at Georgia Tech, where he played his first 2 years. Third year at Alabama, it was the same thing. We have seen him be a target monster, a featured weapon in the receiving game at 2 different schools. I'm supremely confident he is going to be a high volume pass catching running back at the NFL level who's getting 8 to 12 carries a game like Alvin Kamara. Right now, it looks like we're getting rookie year Alvin Kamara type, yet you're getting him at pick 60. I think that's just crazy. And I don't see any world where the ADP doesn't shoot up post NFL draft. Even if he gets late second round draft capital, it should go up. He's basically being drafted as if he's going to go late second round and he doesn't catch passes. And he catches passes and he's probably going to go late first, early second. So Jahmyr Gibbs, from a game theory perspective, you just have to be taking him because that ADP will only go up.
And let's say he does end up with that first round draft capital. For people that aren't plugged into the NFL the way we are, let me just list off. You said an average 80 or an average draft position in the NFL draft at 28. Here's who's drafting at the end of the first round: Dallas, Buffalo, Cincinnati, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Kansas City. There are a lot of primo landing spots in the late first that could end up taking Jahmyr Gibbs. And if he lands on one of those teams, say goodbye to that 6th round draft capital. He's all of a sudden probably going in the 2nd round. So get him for cheap while you still can. Love that call out. Last guy I want to talk about in these rounds, though, rounds 4 to 6 here. Ben, who is you? Or I'm sorry, we each have one more guy that we're going to talk about, our least favorites here. So Ben, who is your least favorite guy to draft in these rounds?
I think there's a theme here for me, at least. I don't like Dameon Pierce. Again, there are just so many running backs with so many uncertain things. And for Dameon Pierce, I think the only thing uncertain is another running back going to be brought in? And even if another running back isn't brought in, I'm still out. Maybe it's not a hot take. We all know that, late round running backs are so replaceable in the NFL. We saw that happen with James Robinson when Travis Etienne was brought in. But for Pierce specifically, he lost steam hard at the end of last season. He was a running back 3 over the latter half of the season, despite being 8th in red zone touches. 8th. It's because he's on an awful offense. And I just said, a couple minutes ago, why we love running backs that are on offenses, good offenses that target the running backs a lot in the red zone. Dameon Pierce might touch the ball a lot in the red zone, but that offense, terrible. We haven't gained any clarity on this team. They're still rebuilding. Here's what we know. We know that Davis Mills isn't going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. We know Brandon Cooks isn't going to be a wide receiver on the Texans this next season. We don't know who the face of the offense is. We don't know how they're going to move the ball. And we don't even know if his job is secure. He doesn't check any boxes. None. For me, he's probably going to be one of the guys I touch the least. I may not draft him at all this offseason. He's not consistent. He's not in a good offense. Yes, he touches the ball, but he's really inefficient with it in the red zone. He was the running back 22 over the second half of the season with 2 receptions per game. I just can't justify taking him.
Yeah, and we've already talked about a lot of the rookies that are coming in, and I've alluded to the running backs, but for people that aren't in the know, let me just read off some of these free agent running backs: Saquon Barkley, Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny, Alexander Madison, Kareem Hunt, Darrell Henderson, Jamal Williams. We talked about the potential cap cuts with, Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon and some other guys, plus this plethora of talented rookie running backs coming in. I'd say there's almost a 0% chance that Dameon Pierce is the number 1 running back on the Texans heading into next year. And, you talked about James Robinson getting, the treatment from Travis Etienne there. Just a few years before that, we saw the same thing with Jordan Howard, where he was getting a ton of volume with the Chicago Bears. And then as soon as that team decided, hey, we are good enough to take that step forward right now, what did they do? They invested draft capital in David Montgomery, and Jordan Howard was shipped off to never be heard of again. That seems like the career trajectory that Dameon Pierce is headed on. So I'm with you. I want nothing to do with Dameon Pierce at his ADP. Josh, same rounds 4 to 6. Who is your least favorite pick here?
So one thing I'll add with Dameon Pierce, 4th round rookie. Remember when Michael Carter was a 4th round rookie and did really, really, really well, and then they drafted Breece Hall? There's
see a lot of stories like this
constantly. There's not a lot of stories where there's a happy ending with these running backs. So
one thing, and it's Arian Foster. Like in the history of the NFL, there was like one late round running back that actually held onto a job for more than a year or two.
There's one more.
Aaron Jones.
Eckler.
There you go. Of course.
My
Yeah.
favorite running
But it
back
took
maybe
him
of all time.
4 years to really get, like, he
That's
wasn't
very
doing much
true.
early in his career. He was kind of a late bloomer. He wasn't a rebuilding team that was fed volume. It just took him some time to kind of find his role.
You didn't know that
Josh.
undrafted 195-pound Austin Eckler was going to flounder for 4 years and then be the fantasy RB1. I'm shocked, Dave.
Just like we all picked.
So I think one of the stone, if not the stone worst picks in these drafts, I think Mahomes is probably the stone worst pick at ADP 14. I think second place, I'm going to give this title to George Kittle at pick. His ADP is 45. So you might say, oh, why don't you like George Kittle? These are his half PPR fantasy points per game finishes over the past 5 seasons. I'm not counting his 6th season because as a rookie, he didn't do anything. 13.5, 13, 12.5, 11.5, and last year, 11.5. That is not sexy. Remember that we do need raw fantasy points. Part of the appeal of Kittle is that it's a low scoring position and he actually gives you raw fantasy points that look like a receiver. George Kittle is giving you like these wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type raw fantasy points at a position that we know is brutal. What do we know? Kittle can't stay healthy. I don't know if it's him specifically, but all I know is that this role of his is truly terrifying. He blocks. He's a guy that invites contact and tries to get yards after the catch. So if you're telling me that my tight end's going to miss several games every single season, and on top of that, just doesn't have anything even close to a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews season in his profile from a fantasy points perspective, then I don't even know what we're doing taking him in the 4th round. So George Kittle, someone that I actually think should be going in the 7th or 8th round. I would consider him in the 7th, 8th round. 4th round, he is entirely off my draft board by many, many rounds.
I think you're missing a really important piece here, Josh, and that's that George Kittle is cool and funny and likable. Doesn't that factor in your process at all? Isn't that why he's getting drafted where he is? Obviously, I'm completely kidding here. I mean, he's a glorified tackle at this point in his career, and he's going to have some monstrous plays, but he's not getting the target share. I hate throwing around the term too many mouths to feed because that just, I feel like it gets used entirely too often. But look at San Francisco. I mean, they have way too much talent. You're looking at Deebo Samuel putting up wide receiver 3 numbers down the stretch when Christian McCaffrey ended up there. Not getting any sort of consistency out of Brandon Ayuk. And then George Kittle is as boomer bust as they can get. I mean, I'd rather have Evan Ingram in a vacuum over George Kittle, who are in very similar positions, and you can get Evan Ingram many rounds later. So completely with you on that one, Josh. As usual, I can't really push back too hard on your analysis. You know, you're pretty bulletproof in the takes that you put out there. Before we log off, though, one more time, Ben, let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what you're going to be working on this offseason.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Ben Wolby. I do work with Josh through the 33rd team. I'll be working on a ton with Josh on some projection models, a lot of analytical stuff. I'm really excited to dive in and maybe provide some deeper insights and some numbers that might help you win your fantasy football leagues, your best ball leagues, and some bets in the upcoming season.
And the most important thing I want to say right now is there is still a lot of work to do this offseason, which you alluded to. So right now we're putting some takes out there, but we still have the free agency. We have draft. We have trades. We have cuts. We still have injuries. So much is going to happen this offseason that you got to make sure you're coming back every single week to see how these takes develop throughout the offseason. Josh, let everyone know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. All my content is on the33rdteam.com. This offseason, I am hiring, I am strategizing, and I am creating content. So living the dream at the 33rd team. Dave, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and when you're not doing that, Josh, you'll find us on Saturdays, probably frolicking around out in the mountains out here, having a good time like we have been doing on the weekends. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for making the time. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, but most importantly, be sure to give us a thumbs up on this video, help some other people find it, and subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. Thank you so much for checking this out. I will be back next week, and I will see you then. Thank you for tuning in. As always, be sure to give us that thumbs up. That's going to help some other people find this video, and give us a subscription on YouTube. That's youtube.com/footballguys. If you're listening to this on audio platforms, leave us a review so I know how I'm doing here. We've got some great guests lined up for the entire offseason. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.